Bruce Johnson, founder and CEO of BizScalers and the BizScalers Way, and today I want to talk to you about how to lead well through a crisis. How do you lead well through a crisis, especially like the one that we're currently in when I'm recording this, the one related to coronavirus, specifically to COVID-19. Now, my guess as a business owner / entrepreneur, chances are that you're asking yourself lots of questions and your employees are asking tons of them as well. In fact, I actually got 2 calls already this morning from clients who are saying, how should I deal with this with my employees? So your employees are asking questions, you're asking questions related to PTO and what are we going to do for business continuity and how are we going to handle cash flow, and you've got 1,000 different questions. So I want to try to answer the most important one from my perspective, which is how do you lead well through this time of crisis? In order to do that, I'm going to go to the computer this week and I'm going to show you some slides because I want you to have the data and the numbers that I'm going to walk through rather than just listening to me and my voice. So let's go to the computer and let's take a look at this. Now, before we jump into, and I'm going to give you 12 or 13 different ideas about how you can be able to lead well through the midst of a crisis. But first, I want to give you some perspective. And when we get to the first point of the 12 or 13 ideas I'm going to give you, you're going to actually understand why I'm going to take a couple minutes to walk through this perspective just to help you get to the place where you have some data around what's going on. Now, first of all, as of this morning, I'm recording this on the 13th day of March in the year 2020. There have been 136,383 reported cases of people who have tested positively for the coronavirus COVID-19. Remember, this is COVID-19. There are plenty of other coronaviruses. This is the COVID-19 version. Of those 136,000, 4,995 people have passed away. Now, since the world's population is a little over 7.7 billion people, remember you got to do the math, that means approximately 0.00167% have tested positively for COVID-19. This is one of the problems in the media. Remember, the media has no motivation to try to calm fears. They have a motivation, self-interest, to fan the flames of fear because that means more people are going to watch, which means they're going to get more ad revenue. Okay, but for you, you need to remember that a number has no relationship or correlation without a denominator. You can have a numerator, but you got to have the denominator. 136,000 is a big number until you put it in perspective of 7.7 billion. So if you have a numerator without a denominator, you don't really have any correlation. You can't make decisions about whatever that number means apart from having the denominator. Now, what makes the mortality rate so difficult to calculate right now is that we just don't know what the denominator is. We have no clue. If we use the Diamond Princess cruise as a model here, a little bit fewer than half of the people there who tested positive with the coronavirus, COVID-19, they had no symptoms. They didn't even know they had it. That's why I say we really have no idea what the denominator is. So when somebody says the mortality rate is 2% or 3% or 6% or 10% or 1%, at this point it's too early. We really do not know what that actual number is going to be. We only have a raw number and it has no correlation. Now, I find that the Diamond Princess actually is probably an interesting analogy to use that might get a little bit closer to what the numbers could be, only because we have an enclosed community, right? You have the people on board that ship. There were 3,700 people on board that ship. When 10 of them tested positive, they put the ship in quarantine, right? And it's, a ship is kind of like a petri dish for creating this. So it's not actually normal, but if you're going to use it, we at least know that all those people were tested, right, at this point. So you've got the worst environment you could possibly create, a cruise ship, which is, everyone's telling you don't get on a cruise ship. Of that, once the quarantine was enacted, it actually started to spread, and ultimately 696 people tested positive. Now, 696, again, seems like a really big number, but that's only a numerator. You've got to have the denominator. The denominator is 3,700. So that means that only 18% in a petri dish ended up catching and being tested positively for the coronavirus COVID-19. Now, that also means positively, and this is what you have to remind your people of, 82% of the people that were there who were in the same environment around us all the time for weeks, 82% never actually tested positively for the coronavirus. Now, of the people who tested positively, 7 people died, roughly a percentage of them. And again, not to negate any death, by the way. 325 of them who tested positively were asymptomatic or recovered, meaning they didn't even know they had it, but they tested positively. That's 47%. So likewise, we could have a lot of people who have it, they don't even know that they have it. 322 people are active right now with it, and they're not serious. Again, another 47%. And then there are 32 people who are still in serious condition. So out of the 3,700 people on board, only 18% of those people ended up testing positively, of which 94% of the people who tested positively will get through it. Right? So when you're thinking about percentages and numbers, we have to deal with real data, not fear. We're dealing with real numbers and real data. And that's probably the closest analogy that we have at this point. Until we get more data, we just don't have enough world macro data to be able to figure out what's going to happen with this. At this point, it's simply fear. Now, this is not to diminish any death, but the reality of life is that roughly 150,000 people die every single day worldwide. This does not negate anyone, by the way. Now, of those, roughly 800 to 1,800 people per day die of the flu. Right? If you look at the CDC, between 290,000 and 650,000 people per year die of the flu around the world. Do the math, divide by 365, those numbers work out about right. Now, remember, it's seasonal, so that you could probably increase those numbers. Let's just call it 1,200 to 2,500 or more people die per day from the flu during flu seasons. Right? So a lot of people die every day from the flu. But again, no one's panicking about that. Now, in the case of the current pandemic, to make the math simple, it's been roughly 104 days since COVID-19 was reported. So you take the number of deaths divided by 104, that gives you 47 people per day have died from COVID-19. The worst day, again, these numbers don't always work out exactly. One day you could have 10 and another day you could have 100, right? But about a month ago, I think was the worst day at 108. So less than 100 people per day currently around the world of 7.7 billion people are currently dying from COVID-19. In the USA, as of this morning, 1,832 people had tested positively. Again, we don't know what the total number is because we haven't tested enough people. But we have 1,800 reported cases. That includes 41 deaths in a country of 330 million people. That works out to 0.0005% of Americans. Now remember, that's not 1%, that's not 1/10 of 1%, that's not 1/100th of 1%, it's not 1/1000th, it's 5/10,000ths of 1% right now have actually tested positively. We're not even close to 1%. Now, again, the numbers are going to increase because you got 330 million people. It's a virus, it will spread. But currently, right now, when people are panicking, less than 0.0005% of Americans have tested positively for the coronavirus. Now, to put this in perspective, and again, remember, this data I'm giving these numbers so that you have data when you're talking to your people. 274 people die needlessly in hospitals in the U.S. every day. The annual average is about 100,000 people. Do the math, it works out to 274 people per day, meaning they catch an infection they shouldn't have caught, and they ended up dying from that. So 274 people die a day. And no one's panicking about the fact that 100,000 people every year die. But currently, we only have 41 people in the U.S. who've died from COVID-19, and everyone's in panic. You can't find toilet paper in grocery stores anymore. Sports venues, everything's died. But 274 die every day because of something happening in a hospital that didn't even actually need to happen. The CDC says that somewhere between 12,000 and 61,000 people per year die from the flu. That's every year. If you average it out, it works out to about 37,500 people per year. That equals 103 people per day. Every day die from the flu, the normal flu. But I don't know about you. I've never heard anyone ever talk about shutting down schools or athletic events or colleges or concerts or churches because of the flu, which actually does claim, on average, 103 people's lives per day here in the U.S., and we're not even close to that here yet. Now, on the CDC page, by the way, when you look at how many Americans die each year, they use the year 2017, and on that year, 55,672 people died because of the flu. Do the math, that's 153 people per day. But you weren't panicked, your people weren't panicked. Why? Because at that point, you accepted it. This is normal. A number of people are going to die from the flu, and we're okay. We move on. The only reason that the COVID-19 is a problem is because it's new, and people are panicked about something that they don't know. But when you step back and get perspective, you were okay 3 weeks ago. You were okay 6 months ago. The stock market was okay 3 weeks ago. The stock market was okay 6 months ago. With the fact that, on average, 103 people, or in certain years, up to 153 people, die every day from the flu, and no one was worried about canceling any event, colleges, schools, athletic events, etc. Now, again, I'm not making this stuff up. You can go to the CDC website and pay, if I don't have my integrity, what do I have? I'm quoting their numbers. You can see it right down there. The 8th leading cause in America is the flu. You probably didn't think about that, but it is. 55,672 people in the year that they use here for 2017 for leading causes of death. Now note, by the way, the first cause of death, 647,000. Very few people are worried about the fact that their lack of exercise and their overeating and their bad eating is actually 11 times more likely for them to cause death than the flu, but that's for another day. Remember, it's just perspective. People can't figure out what to deal with because they're not looking at real data, and they're looking at numerators without looking at denominators. You've got to give them all of that perspective. Now, one last piece of data to help you gain some perspective is that the last flu epidemic to hit the world was in 2009. If you remember, this was the swine flu or the H1N1 flu. This is, again, from the CDC. I'm not making up any of these numbers, right? This is from their website. Between April 12, 2009 and April 10, 2010, there were 60.8 million cases of H1N1 in the U.S. 60.8 million. Now, I was there in 2009. People were not panicked, but 60.8 million people got H1N1. 274,000 of those required hospitalization, and 12,469 people actually died from H1N1 here in the U.S. But again, no level of panic like we've seen in the past few weeks. But that was there. That was real. Right now, we don't have that kind of data. Now, this is not to suggest that you and I should not be cautious or that this is a trivial matter. It is not trivial at any level. But it is about perspective. And that's the thing that's driving the current state of chaos. It's not COVID-19, it's the fear about COVID-19. The CDC and the WHO have called this a pandemic, but the real pandemic isn't as much the pandemic about COVID-19 as it's a pandemic of fear. Now, knowing that as a leader, that's a good thing, right? Because if it's fear, that's where you and I come in as leaders. This is our moment, right? One of the leadership lessons in the BizScalers Club is that as a leader, you should always embrace chaos, conflict, crisis. Why? Because that's where real leadership is formed, right? I mean, this is your moment as a leader to actually prove your leadership and become a better leader. This is good news for you. It is our job as leaders to bring calm and perspective. It is our job to bring people through the chaos and through the crisis. That's what leaders do. Unfortunately, quote, leaders in the media and unfortunately people in the political environment don't have that same kind of motivation, which is unfortunate. They should. But you and I, that's our job. You and me, that's what we do. We come in alongside our people and we bring perspective, we bring calm, and we help people remember that our best days are always in front of us. They're not behind us. We remind them of the data. We remind them that you can't have a numerator without a denominator to make any kind of meaning from it. So with that said, let me get you to 12, and then I'm going to probably add a 13th one if I remember. I just thought of one. That's why I keep saying 12 or 13. I think I put 12 here, and I don't think I put the 13th on here, but there is a 13th one here. So here we go. Number one, if you want to lead well through crisis, number one, you have to bring a sense of calm assurance to yourself. Now you hopefully understand why I walked through all of that data before we got to this point, because if you can't get to the place where you're calm, if you can't get to the place where you have perspective, you're not going to be able to do that with your people. The first thing you have to do if you want to lead well is you have to get yourself to a place where you're not in fear, because you will transmit whatever you're feeling. If you want to communicate confidence, you have to be confident. You can't communicate confidence but internally be fearful, right? You've got to figure out how to do that yourself. Now, the good news about fear is that it is always a head game and only a head game, which means that you have complete control over it. It's what goes on in here. It's what the story you're telling yourself. Fear is always a negative expectation about a future event. It's the story you're telling yourself about that future event. Fear is not real. It may feel real, but it is not real. If it were real, you'd be experiencing the thing that you're fearing. And it wouldn't be fear any longer. It would be reality, right? Like if you fear pain, you're not experiencing pain. You fear pain because something's happened and you're now experiencing pain. So fear is always a head game. That's why one person can look at something and not be fearful, and the other person look at and be fearful. It has nothing to do with the thing. It has everything to do with the story that we're telling ourselves. So if you can tell yourself a different story, you can get yourself to a place of calm. Let me give you an example of this. And I apologize that this one's going a little bit longer than normal, but I think this is a pretty important topic here. So back several years ago, there was a crisis in Washington, D.C. when I lived there. We had the D.C. sniper. And during that year, so I'm thinking, if I remember correctly, it's right around the year 2000, 2001, somewhere in there. When we're going through it, the entire city was pretty much on lockdown. And people were afraid to go out to get gas. They were afraid to go to, Lowe's or Home Depot. They were afraid to go to the grocery store. They were afraid of their kids. Malls were empty. I mean, the entire city was in total panic because one person was randomly shooting other people, right? So as a pastor of a large church at that point, I'm figuring, okay, like I have to lead my people through this, but I've got to get to the place where I can lead them well. So let me do some work on me, right? And so I started with me. And I started thinking, okay, now DC has got 5.7 million people in its metro area, in the MSA. 5.7 million people. And 5.7 million people, we've got one person with a rifle. The probability that on any given day that one person is going to target me is really, really infinitesimal. And the fact that he's going to be at the right gas station at the exact moment that I'm going to be there is really, 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 really small. So from a probability standpoint, I shouldn't be afraid because it's more likely, far more likely, that I'm going to be able to go get my gas in my car and drive away without being shot than I am going to be shot, right? And once I knew that, like that all of a sudden began to help me go, I don't have to worry about it. And so I would literally go to the gas station back then and I would stand there with my arms wide open and I would go, and then people would be looking at me like, what's wrong with that? I'd say, you can do the same thing. There is no way you're going to be shot right now. Don't be afraid. And then I'd go back and I could tell my congregation, I could help them get through it. But I had to get through it first. And I had to figure out a way to get there. So the reason I went through all those numbers was hopefully to get you to a place of realizing, you know what, there are some real numbers out there, but when you do the math, the probability of it not affecting you is much higher than the probability that it's going to affect you. Once you get to that place, then you can start calming other people. That's number one. But you can't lead well if you're in panic mode. So take care of number one first. Kind of like an airplane, put the mask on yourself first. Number two. You have to communicate quickly and you have to communicate frequently. One of the leadership lessons of the BizScalers Club is, in the absence of information, most people fill in the blanks with negative expectations. Most people fill in the blanks with negative expectations. That is always true. So one of the things that you need to realize, and as a small business, you may not always think about this, but your people need to know ASAP what you're going to do, and you need to let them know quickly, here's what's going to happen, here's what we're going to do. Very fast. In a social media world, people are used to getting stuff fast. There was a day when you could have waited, a week or so and then given people information. Nowadays, you have to give it to them as quick as you possibly can. And what you need to do in those moments is you need to convey a sense of calm. In every crisis or time of chaos, people long for a leader who's going to stand up and say, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. That's what they need from you. That's what leaders do. This is our moment to shine, right? This is the moment we say, hey, listen, we're going to get through this. We've always gotten through it. And then you refer back to past crises. You say, we got through this one. You got through this one. We're going to get through this one just as we have in the past. Our best days are always in front of us. They're not behind us. They need you to stand up and communicate regularly and on a frequent basis that, listen, we're going to get through this. This is your job. So stand up as a leader, communicate quickly and frequently. And it might be daily, and we're going to talk about that in just a second here. By the way, I did wash my hands. That's before this. Okay, in case you're saying, hey, did he just rub his nose? This is allergy season, by the way. So for those of you who are allergy sufferers like me, be aware, just because you have allergies does not mean that you have COVID-19. Connect with how people are feeling. This is very important. Let them know that you understand them. A classic leadership mistake, and I just talked to somebody this morning about this. A classic leadership mistake is to tell people how to feel. You can't tell somebody how to feel. You can't say to somebody, don't panic. Right? You can't tell them how to feel. What you can do is you can say, I understand that you're panicked. I can understand if you're watching the newspaper, you're looking at your 401k, you're talking to friends, you went to the grocery store, you couldn't get any toilet paper. Like, I totally understand why you're feeling some fear and panic right now. Totally understandable. And I can't tell you, this is the key phrase, I can't tell you how to feel. But what I can do is I can share with you what I'm doing. Or you can say, but I can share with you some data. And then you can try to give them a different perspective. Because if people can learn to think differently, if you can give them real different data, then they can have a different emotion, because our emotions are based on what we believe. So change the belief, you can change the behavior, you can change the feeling. That's what you need to do. But you can't tell somebody not to feel something. So if you want to lead well, connect with how people are feeling, let them know you understand them, and then don't tell them you can't feel that. Tell them, I understand. It's understandable you feel that way. Here's how I'm processing, or here's what I'm doing, or here's some data that you might not know. And when you start thinking like this, I think that this will help you. Let them get calm, but don't tell them how to feel. You know, if you want to lead well, don't tell people how to feel. And by the way, any husband should know that lesson. All right, number 4, help them see that they and you will get through this. This is your time to cast vision, right? So you're casting vision about what you're going to do, how this is, you're going to be better 6 months from now, a year from now. This is going to force you to make some changes, but those changes are going to make us better, leaner, stronger. We're going to, be able to take market share. Like, this is your time to say, hey, we're going to get through this together. We're going to make this work. And when we get through on the other side, it's going to be great. A couple years ago, I had a conversation with Ken Blanchard, and he was talking about post 9/11, their company was losing over $1 million a month. And the question was, are we going to let people off, or what are we going to do? And so they made a decision as a company that they were going to reduce salaries. And they said, but listen, we don't want to let anyone go here. We're going to reduce salaries, and we're going to get through this together. And when we get through this, hopefully within the next 12 months, we're going to take everybody on a vacation. They said, I think they took everyone to Hawaii, if I remember correctly. Right? He was casting vision, like he said, like, our best days are in front of us. We can get through this together. We're going to tighten our belts together. We're going to make this happen. Right? That's the job of a leader. Number 5, once you have the big stuff done, meaning once you've taken care of yourself and you've taken care of their hearts, this is the part you have to take care of. Fear is not a head issue, right? You got to get rid of the heart problem, right? Get them to the place they feel your heart. That's the big stuff. Then you have to lay out all the details. So what are we going to do, in terms of, the details, PTO, and, parents who got their kids home, and, worrying about paychecks and, sales and quotas and metrics. Like, they've got a lot of questions. You're going to have to figure out how to answer all of the detailed questions, because if you don't, remember, they're going to fill it in with negative expectations. So as much as you can, give them real data in real time. I'll put number 13 here, because this would be a classic point. I don't think I put it on the slide, but this is an important one, which is, when you make a mistake, own it. Anyone in the middle of a crisis is going to make mistakes. I mean, unfortunately, with our political system, leaders who are in the political realm hate admitting they made mistakes, because they know that'll be in a campaign ad against them in the future. But you're not worried about campaigning, right? If you make a mistake, just own it. Like, we made a mistake in terms of, some of our funding, or we made a mistake, we got some information that wasn't accurate. Whatever mistakes are made, just always own it. That's a critical lesson if you want to lead well through the midst of chaos and crisis. Make sure that you just own that. That would be a bonus. That's your number 13. I think a lot of people make that mistake, that they don't want to admit that they made a mistake. Just own it. You made a mistake. That's normal. And then correct it and move on. Number 6. Create a war room, whatever you want to call your war room. And whether you bring everybody in your team, depends on the size of your team, or you bring in your executive team, or different people from different parts of your business together. But create a group of people who are going to kind of help shepherd and lead your company through this. And then make sure that you give at least weekly, but even better, daily updates of what you and your team are doing. And one of the things that you can do in trying to give these updates, if it were me personally leading your company, I would do most of this by video. And the reason being is because people, just like right now, you can hear my heart. You can't hear that in a bunch of words on a piece of paper. A lot of companies are sending out emails and other things right now. This is what we're doing, and that's okay. But nothing communicates from a leadership perspective as well as you personally talking to people. So if it's small enough, you can tell them one-on-one, and you have a daily update, at your office, or if you're going to have a dispersed team, et cetera, do it by video so people can see and hear your heart and the tone. It's so critical. People need to hear your tone, right? So create a war room and give updates regularly, daily, at least, hopefully, but at least weekly. Use this as a chance to make some changes. If you want to lead well, this is the time to look at your company and say, we probably should have made some changes before that we didn't. Now let's make those changes now. This is a time for creativity. This is a time to look for opportunities. Remember, every crisis creates new opportunities. So take whatever you're doing. What are some opportunities that we can now take advantage of? So maybe the things that you've been primarily selling, now you're going to primarily sell some other things. That's okay. That's what good leaders do, right? You're going to make pivots. You're going to make changes. So use this as an opportunity to take advantage of some opportunities in the market that you can do this, by the way, not price gouging, but looking for opportunities. What do people need right now? What do they want? Like I was going to talk about something different, but since everyone's worried about coronavirus, I changed, right? You pivot and you say, what's the opportunity? Talk about or sell this thing that's going to help them solve the thing in front of them. Number 8, if you want to lead well through chaos and crisis, come up with a cash/funding plan to get you through the next X number of weeks or months. All right, if you're going to lead well as a leader, you got to figure out how we're going to pay for this thing. Now, it's kind of late to do this if you haven't done it, but in the BizScalers Club, we always recommend that you keep at least 2 months, preferably 3 months in cash at all times. You may want to do more, but remember there's an opportunity cost to not investing in growth. But at minimum, you should always have 2 to 3 months in cash at all times. If you've done that, then you should be able to weather this much better. If you haven't done that, you're going to figure out how am I going to fund and get through this period of time. But you have to have a cash funding plan to be able to lead well through any kind of crisis. Number 9, you want to focus in on growth, not on cutting. This is one of the mistakes. The natural tendency for a lot of companies when a downturn comes is they start cutting everything. So they cut their marketing budget, right? So rather than cutting people, we're cutting marketing, right? We're cutting, personal development. We're cutting training. So they all cut. But you can't grow your way through cutting. It just doesn't work that way. And study after study that's been done through multiple times of downturns has found that the companies that continue to invest in their marketing, continue to invest in their people during the downturn are the companies that, shocker, tend to grow faster during the downturn. And guess what? When they're coming out of it, they also grow much faster than everyone else because everyone else now is starting to get their marketing cranked up. But the other ones have been doing it for the last 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. And so they've already primed the market. So they take off and they grow, I can't remember, 2 or 3x faster than the people who don't. So in the middle of this, if you want to lead well, you need to remind your people, remember, our best days are always in front of us. We're going to keep marketing. We're going to keep going after our customers. We're going to keep servicing people well. We're going to do all these things great in the middle of this because that's who we are. We're tightening our belt on some things, but we have to keep moving forward. We're going to grow our way through this. We're not going to cut our way through this. That's incredibly important if you want to lead well through chaos. Number 10, you need to manage morale every day and in every interaction. One of the leadership lessons of the BizScalers Club has to do with that whenever you're with your people, you have to be up. And the reason why is because people draft from your energy. So if you're down and people are sensing that, like their morale is going to go down. So you always have to be up because morale matters. You have to cast vision. You have to work on morale every single day. Their productivity either goes up or down based on their morale feeling. So if you're with your people and morale starts going down, you got to do whatever you need to do to pump people up and get them encouraged and remind them that your best days are in front of you. And we're working together. We're going to get everyone through this. Manage the morale every single day. You can't do one little talk or put one little video out and think you're done. Like this is a daily deal. Moment by moment in every interaction. Your job is to help people get through this. That's what leaders do. We're going to get to the other side. We're taking people to another place. And that's why I love crisis, right? Because that's where you prove your leadership. That's where people begin to follow you with their heart and with their emotions. And when you get through this, they will follow you better than they've ever followed you in the past. I mean, this is your moment. Oops. Hit the wrong button there. And there we go, number 11. Be more present than usual, especially if you're not normally around all the time. So if you've built your business so it's a business that's scalable, that means that you don't have to be there all the time. There are an awful lot of people in the BizScalers Club and a lot of small business owners that are there only for a certain amount of the day, hours of the day. If that's who you are, then that is not the thing that you should be doing during a moment of crisis, right? Leaders are on deck in a crisis. So be more present. If you normally come in at, say, at 9 or 9:30, you have your morning routine and your exercise routine and all that kind of stuff, and that's fine because you kind of lead it more like a lifestyle business. And your people start getting in at 7:30 or 8. Like you need to be there before 7:30. You should be the first one in. You should be the last one out. If you've got night shift people, show up at night shift time and walk the halls and talk to people. Again, you can't shake hands anymore, but you have to be present for all of your people. They need to see you more than they've ever seen you because they need to know that the leader's in charge and that you're present. That's critical, very critical if you want to be a great leader through the midst of a chaos or crisis. And the last one here, since I gave you 13 already, is be in a constant state of evaluation. Be in a constant state of evaluation. In other words, keep track of the lessons that you're learning so that you can adjust and pivot quickly. And then when this is over, create a better plan for the next time. So as you're going through every day and you're getting more data, you should be evaluating just like any other AAR. You know, what's working, what's not, what am I learning, what could I do differently, what will I do differently. Like that mindset of AAR should be part of your all-day thought process every day. And anytime you need to make a pivot, then you make a pivot. And hence why, you need to own up for the mistakes that you've made. But the key here is that you need to keep some kind of journal and some kind of written record of whatever you're thinking and going through, what you tried, what worked and what didn't work. Because when we get to the other side of this, and we will get to the other side of this, we get through every one of these crises. None of them last for decades, right? Like whether it's going to be 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months, a year, like we don't know. But when you get to the other side, right, you're going to be able to formulate the plan for when it happens the next time, because there is going to be a next time. Where pandemics happen every X number of years. Crises and downturns in the economy happen every X number of years. We know bad times are going to come, but we don't live in fear of when they're going to come. When they arrive, we deal with them. We don't allow fear to drive us. We just deal with them. It's reality. Okay, what are we going to do next? But we don't let the fear control us. But something else is going to happen. Right now, if you've been reading a lot, you know that that there are certain areas of the world that, like Singapore, that are being held up as models where they're not having as many cases. And part of the reason why is because in the early 2000s, when SARS came about, and remember, everyone thought SARS was going to take over the world and everyone's going to die. Well, in which, by the way, the SARS effectively died out pretty quickly. Singapore was not really adequately equipped, and so they made some changes based on that. And then in 2009, when the H1N1 came, they thought they had the right playbook, but it wasn't the right playbook. And so they made some mistakes, but they learned from that. And between those two things, they've changed their playbook as a country. And now they're responding, in many cases, better than a lot of other countries. And they're running that playbook. But the reason they're running that playbook is because they looked at what happened in 01, they looked at what happened in 09, and now in 2020, they have a better plan. So the fact that you may not have a business continuity plan right now, you're creating one. And when we're done with this, you'll have a better one than the one you could create today. That's fine. When the next one comes, you'll be better prepared, you'll make some mistakes, you'll learn some new things, and you'll create a better plan. That's the nature of leadership. It's not about perfection. It's about figuring out what's the next best thing to be able to do. And your best days are always in front of you if you keep this kind of mindset. So hopefully I gave you 13 different ideas today about how you can lead well through the midst of any kind of crisis or any kind of chaos, especially like the one we're currently faced with. Remember, it always starts with you first, and then start working out with your people. And remind yourself and them that your best days are always in front of you. And remember, you can't deal with a numerator without a denominator. So hopefully you found this helpful. If you did, pass this along to some other business owners and entrepreneurs that you might know that might be helpful for. If you're watching this by video and you haven't subscribed yet, hit the YouTube or button to subscribe. If you're listening by podcast and you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button there as well. Because my commitment to you each and every week is to bring you actionable content that will help you be able to grow and scale your business faster. I know today was a little bit longer than normal. Normally we try to keep them between 8 and 10 minutes long, but this seemed kind of important, so I hope you don't mind the length for this week. And then finally, for those of you who might be interested and want to know how to grow and scale your company faster, make sure you check out the BizScalers Club at scalingclub.com, scalingclub.com. So until next week, to your accelerated success, Bruce out.